please welcome to the stage the editor-in-chief of Arab News, Mr. Faisal Abbas, and his panelists.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my distinct pleasure to be moderating this rather exciting session about the future of space exploration. With us on the panel are two fantastic experts. To my immediate left is His Excellency Mohammed Al Ahbabi, who is the Director General of the UAE Space Agency. And of course, last but not least, is a man who's actually been to space more than once. Of course, Colonel Terry Virts is an astronaut, a commander of the International Space Station, and a filmmaker, or as I would like to call him, a space enthusiast. And we're going to see why now. But let us start with the UAE, considering congratulations, you've just had a successful space mission with the UAE, first UAE astronaut Hazza al-Mansouri, who's just returned successfully from outer space. And as this is a business conference, let me start with the immediate question. What's the return on investment with such missions? Is it just science, soft power, or is there actually a business case for space exploration, Your Excellency?
Thank you, Faisal. I think it's good to start with Hazza. Hazza was the first Emirati astronaut to went to the International Space Station. Hazza followed the steps of His Royal Highness Prince Sultan, who was the first Arab astronaut, and a lot of excitement in the UAE and across the region. Back to your question, how space is contributing to economy. I know that there are some studies that if you put $1 today in space as investment, you get in long term around between $12 and $14, which means it's a long-term investment, and in fact, space has become a contributor to the knowledge-based economy.
Terry, let me take the question to you, given that NASA has a bit more experience. Do you agree with the figures that Mohammed just proposed? Does it bring that much? We have some very savvy business executives here, and what Mohammed is suggesting is that investing $1 into space exploration can potentially bring back 14.
I think that number is right, and one of the things I noticed when I went into space for the first time, they said that my space shuttle mission cost $1 billion. But when we got into space, we didn't open up the payload bay doors and launch $1 billion bills out into space. That money was all spent on Earth, providing middle-class jobs of people who buy houses and cars and refrigerators. And more importantly, the technology that's developed applies to other industries. And so there's a very strong synergistic effect between the investment that goes into space and the benefits that come to the economy on Earth.
Right. Well, as an outside observer, I obviously haven't been to space, as you can imagine, but as an outside observer, we noticed that the level of excitement towards space exploration goes up and down. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. As His Excellency pointed out, Saudi Arabia has had its own up when it comes to the excitement when His Royal Highness Prince Sultan went to space in the 80s. But we feel that this is going in cycles. There is sort of a momentum building up now. How do you explain this sort of cyclical levels of enthusiasm for space exploration?
I, as part of my new post-NASA career, I speak around the world, and there's excitement everywhere I go. I mean, when I go to China, little Chinese kids come up in their spacesuits, with their Chinese flag instead of American flag. In Europe, in the Middle East, I was in the Emirates last year. No matter where I go, there's an excitement for space travel. It's one of those global kind of human ambitions. People have always been explorers, and we all share the same sky. It doesn't matter what continent you're from, you look up and you see the same moon. So I think it's a global thing, and because of the private sector today I think there's a renewed excitement. And of all of the things that people do, this one thing of exploration is something that can unite us and excite us. And when you get young kids excited about studying math and science and doing these very difficult projects, that's a great way to move our youth. I think that's the direction we want to move them in. There's lots of other directions that end up very badly, and space and exploration is one that actually, I think, moves human society in the right direction.
So staying with the space exploration creates cooperation theme, Your Excellency, we know that the UAE mission was launched from Russia. We had a reporter there who covered it live. As you know, Saudi Arabia has decided to come back into the race and create the Saudi Space Agency earlier this year. Is the UAE program cooperating with other Arab space agencies, and what sort of level of cooperation is happening?
Well, in UAE, we do believe that space is all about cooperation, especially for emerging space nation. If you want to be follow, and catch, the train, you have to start from where the other ends. So we value international cooperation. We have cooperation with every almost space agency. We signed more than 25 space cooperation agreements, and actually we activated these cooperation agreements to projects. One of them is with Roscosmos, which is the space agency in Russia. Today is the only way to get astronaut to International Space Station is through Russian vehicle, Soyuz. And this is why we cooperate with Russia. We trained our astronaut in Russia. Then he flew to the International Space Station on Soyuz. In terms of the Arab space cooperation, UAE has initiated a few years ago an initiative to try to bring the Arab space agencies and institutions to work together. And early this year in Abu Dhabi, it was announced, not established, but actually the intention to put that cooperation. 11 space agencies or space institutions came together. And now we think this is the first step. This year we will have another meeting. UAE is not just only initiate that initiative, but also donate a satellite called 813 to serve the Arab region, and also to be a platform to accommodate Arab engineers and scientists to work together. I think this is a good step, and we are working together with our colleagues here in the Saudi Space Authority to support the Arab space cooperation, because we think this region deserves much more in this area.
Well, building on that, Terry, what do you think the Arab space exploration can add to the collective knowledge of the world? Is there a niche that, looking at this part of the world, you think we should focus on?
Right. I think that's an important concept of having a niche. Back in the 70s, Canada decided that it was going to focus on robotics. So as America built the space shuttle, Canada built the robotic arm. Then when we built the space station, Canada built a bigger robotic arm for the space station. And that's a niche for a relatively smaller size country to do. So I think in this area, in this part of the world, there would be maybe certain types of instruments that you could focus on. I know water is a big issue here in the Middle East, so there's a lot of weather satellites. So if you could build instruments or satellites that focused on that. The UAE has a really exciting Mars program. This HOPE, we've been talking about that a lot. This part of the world is a great analog for Mars because it's a desert. A lot of the ways that people live here are the ways that people are going to have to live on Mars. So I think that's a great thing to do. Space tourism, from a business case point of view, is going to start generating revenue and profits very soon. And this is a part of the world that would be great for that. I know the UAE may be hosting Virgin Galactic. I know Saudi has a big project to build a resort area. I think this is a great area. The space tourist companies should be launching tourists from this part of the world. Maybe not in August, but maybe in the winter months or something like that. So I think that there's some different areas, but I think it's important to think as a nation, what's our vision? You're probably not going to build launch pads and rockets and satellites and moonlight. You're not going to be able to do everything. That's a difficult thing. So I think if you could pick out a few niche areas, that would be the way to go.
You mentioned Mars. I quite can't figure out whether the next destination will be Mars or the Moon again. 'Cause it keeps on changing.
It changes every 4 years, yes.
Is it? Is it the capabilities in terms of science? Or how is that decision made?
Right. So I think my personal view, Mars is really the long-term 21st century goal. Mars is a very interesting place. It has a 24-and-a-half-hour day. There is water there in the ice caps. There used to be water in the form of an ocean. The gravity is much closer to Earth. There's more, the radiation environment is better than on the moon. There's lots of reasons to go to Mars. But the moon is much closer. The moon's a 3-day trip away instead of many months away. So when we did the Apollo program, we didn't just send astronauts to the moon, we did a build-up approach. We had Mercury, we had Gemini, which developed and tested the technologies, and then we went to the moon. So I think as far as Martian exploration, I think the moon is a great intermediate step, and there's lots of things you can learn there. Some people say, well, we've been to the moon. Well, we haven't been to the moon. Like our grandfathers did the Apollo program, but nobody working in any space agency today sent people to the moon. So there's a lot of things to learn at the moon, I think, on the way to Mars.
But if you were to predict a date of man landing on Mars, when would you say?
Right.
When would it happen?
It's funny. Mars has always been 20 years in the future. There was a German scientist named Wernher von Braun who designed the Apollo program, and during Apollo he said we could be on Mars by 1989. So I had a chance to speak at the White House last year, and I've spoken to a lot of congressmen and senators. And the thing that I told Vice President Pence is that getting to Mars doesn't depend on the rocket science; it depends on the political science.
So it's the quote of the day.
Yeah. So it's such a big program that's going to require actual dollars. This is going to be an expensive endeavor. Our governments and it needs to be an international cooperation. So we need to figure out a way, patterned after the International Space Station, where we come up with a vision and a goal, and then we stick to it and we don't change it every 4 years. So Mars is something you can't do easily or quickly. You need to have a long-term way to keep it together.
And how's it looking with this administration if it gets re-elected? Would it be the Mars or would it be the moon?
Well, we have an Artemis program, which is to go back to the moon, and that will be the first stepping stone. And so, which I think is a good idea. I think we do need to go to the moon. I think even more important than that is to figure out how to keep it beyond this administration, because this won't be the American president forever. And then the guy who replaces him won't be the American president forever, and so we need to figure out how to have some continuity in our space program.
Of course, the UAE space program is actually going to Mars next year. Of course, it's an unmanned mission.
Yes.
It's called
The Hope.
The Hope.
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit more about what it hopes to achieve?
Well, actually, it was launched in 2014 at the same day when the space agency was announced. It's a visionary mission. It's a journey. It's not a destination. It's a scientific mission. A spacecraft around 1.5 ton will be launched next year in July. In a journey around 7 months to reach Mars. It's going to be an orbiter collecting some science about Mars atmosphere. For us, this is a platform for learning. We are educating our people. We engage with international space agencies, with businesses, with companies, and we learned a lot. This is, of course, will bring science, so there is a value on the international space scientific community because the information that will come back from Mars will be distributed to over 200 universities and institutions free of charge. This is, of course, a visionary project that we try to inspire the young people, especially in this region, that it's possible. Nothing impossible if you have, the vision and the plans and the people who can work on this. The project on track in terms of time. It's going to be launched from Japan on July 14th next year.
Right, and could you tell us a little bit about the science behind it and the manpower behind it? Are you relying on UAE talent to build and operate this mission, or is the UAE just providing the means?
Well, actually, it's all planetary missions are done in cooperative manners. This project for us, it's a first project. We are learning through it, so we are cooperating with 3 universities, plus some universities and companies in UAE. But the science behind this is, there's a big question about, water on Mars or life on Mars. So the interest of humanity today is to identify or to try to find if there's water on Mars. So this mission is driven by, a weather satellite for Mars. It will inspect, the atmosphere of Mars, looking for signature of water. For us, this is, it's not a destination, it's a journey. What matters for us is how many people we educate, how many people we inspire, and also position our country and our region in the international global space map.
Well, good luck with that. Terry, you mentioned something about the commercial aspects of space exploration. Indeed, you've mentioned a number of big shots who are trying to, they're trying to start a kind of space tourism programs. You mentioned Sir Richard Branson, of course. Basically, from a scientific point of view, are these commercial programs a distraction, or do they actually help the space exploration? In essence, if you want to look at it from an external point of view, it's basically limited to a number of people who are rich enough to afford the ticket. I think it's around $250,000 to go to space. But how does it contribute to what you two gentlemen are trying to achieve?
So there's really 2 different aspects of private space. There's a space tourism aspect, and there's a lot more people that can afford a $250,000 ticket than a $50 million ticket to the space station. But there's also the actual launching rockets for scientific or commercial purposes, and that's what Elon Musk through SpaceX and also Jeff Bezos through Blue Origin and Relativity. There's a lot of companies now doing that. And that's not a distraction by any means. In fact, it's an enabler. I don't think that we're going to have much success in space exploration without people like that, because private companies can't just raise taxes forever. They have to actually get things done and make money, or they are out of business quickly. So these guys innovate quickly. When they make a mistake, they fix it quickly, and that pace of being able to make changes has innovations like these boosters that fly back and land. They do things that, frankly, I don't think the governments are able to do. Governments are important because they can provide the money, they can make international partnerships, they can do things that only governments can do, but the private sector can do things that only the private sector can do. And if you have that public-private partnership, I think that's the key to future.
Right. I'm going to end with final thoughts from both of you. If I were to ask you, what's the next big thing in space? Mohammed.
I think they call it a new space, which is more commercial, less role of the governments and more roles for the private sector.
Terry, are we going to discover a new planet, different aliens?
I agree completely, but we are discovering new planets every day. NASA has several satellites that are looking for planets around other stars. That's actually very exciting. Unfortunately, those stars are really, really, really far away, so it's going to be a while before we get there.
On that note, I would like to thank you both for your insight, and I would like to thank you for being a splendid audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.